Hi, this is Nick with Tactically Custom doing another ACR. I have Ron here from Civilian Trauma Solutions. We're going to be talking about the Tactical Trauma Care course, or the TCC, that Civilian Trauma Solutions as well as Front Sight Solutions offered back in February. Rami, if you want to talk about your company and kind of your background and where you come from and everything like that.
Sure. First off, thanks for having me. Great opportunity. Always like talking this kind of stuff. But about me, I am a full-time firefighter paramedic, and I've been doing that since about 13 years now, full-time. A couple of years before that, part-time. I'm also a registered nurse. So I became an RN in 2016, if my memory serves me. And so that was pretty interesting, going from the pre-hospital setting, my whole career, and then working in the hospital. I'd worked in the hospital as a medic part-time here and there, but then I became an RN. I worked on the west side of Chicago, and I also had the luxury of working at premier level 1 trauma center for pediatrics downtown. So just getting that whole dynamic and just seeing the complete differences in care really opened my eyes and really just made me more interested in this kind of stuff. And we got super hot and heavy into rescue task force at the fire department, and that kind of led me to start the company. And I was lucky enough to hook up with Gary and Ernie at Front Sight, and so we've run classes through Front Sight, we've run classes through Civilian Trauma Solutions, but our big bread and butter, honestly, is we do active shooter response for companies. Well, we used to, and then COVID hit. So that's kind of changed our business model. So we're doing smaller individual classes now, guys in the 2A community, personal responsibility and safety. But we used to do a lot of active shooter, public safety, bleeding control, stuff like that in corporations. And then we would do some consulting with police departments, other fire departments as well. And so we're kind of trying to be a one-stop shop. And so that's me in a nutshell. I could go on forever. I love talking about myself. So, but yeah, that's me in a nutshell. And obviously we had that class a couple weeks ago, and it was a beautiful day and pretty good turnout. So we were able to get outside, get some practices outside, and led to this. So I'm super excited for this conversation.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I know Gary is down in Alabama. I think he's gonna be coming back. Front Sight's getting outside of Illinois, which is kind of cool, and starting to travel. So I'll have him on future ones of these. So it was a collaboration between Front Sight and Civilian Trauma Solutions. So to kind of give a quick scenario, I hooked up with Front Sight last year, and I know other people who've seen these have heard me say that. And we did a lot of reps. Guys are always on the flat range, shooting. Guys are in the defensive classes shooting. I see IFACs. People have IFACs, which is great, and I was one of them. I talked to a Marine buddy of mine, what should I have? And, watching YouTube videos, here's some things that you have on you. And I watched some tutorials, but zero class time on any of this stuff that I carry with me every day around the range. And I would imagine that's probably the case, as much as probably some of the guys don't want to admit it, that's probably the case for majority of the people on any range, whether it's a move and shoot type range or a flat range. Haven't really had any training in this, whether it's a formal training, impromptu, what have you. So I was begging Gary for a while, like, hey, when are we doing these classes? I want to do some med classes and get some of that, because there's some outfits out there that do med classes. And Gary always talked about doing his, and it was always the winter time. And then this finally came up, and it was a day class. And like you said, we had a lot of guys in there. Some of the guys that I've recognized from Front Sight. There were some police officers in there. And what I found most surprising out of just the group that we have is the police officers not really having the training, or departments don't do a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Which they're the ones that are on the front line, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's pretty upsetting, actually. Being on the fire department for so long, we work so hand in hand with law enforcement, and it's just unfortunate that there's some agencies out there that aren't taking safety for their officers on the street more important. And some places are issuing tourniquets, but that might be it. And I can't talk or speak to what they get in the academy. I have no idea, but everyone that's come to one of our classes has said, they gave me a tourniquet, or we got a grant and I got a bag sitting in my car, but I've never had any training on it. So it was nice to see, when we get LEOs coming and paying out of pocket coming to these classes, but it's also just super sad to me, in the full, thinking about it.
Yeah, and I know, guys like you, EMS, firefighter. I mean, they're trained. That's what you guys. I mean, you're not just out there fighting fires. Firefighters, they're trained in this stuff, and obviously, if you have any call, from my understanding, a fire truck or ambulance is following the squad type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I just look back. The squad is usually that first one there. There's gunfire. Besides the people around, you're not coming into that zone yet. It's going to be an officer typically that comes in. Right. To suppress that and then take care of any threats, and then you guys follow up. So that's why I really was happy to see some LEOs in there, and disappointed that they have to pay for it out of their own pocket to get this training. Right. For me, I would rather pay a little bit more in my tax dollars than to give them this training, because one day that may be me that they need to help save.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, they are 100%, they've got the guns. They're going to be there before us. They're going to make initial contact with the threat, and we're a responder agency. They're a patrol agency. They're on the streets. They're going to be there quicker. They're going to make contact with the threat, and they're, hopefully going to make our life a whole lot easier. We practice active shooter response training with the police, rescue task force stuff. So we'll go in, there'll be a contact team, and then we'll go in with a security escort. And we've worked with local and state and federal agencies as well. And it's just kind of getting everybody on the same page. But yeah, they're going to be there. And the more training that they have actually in medicine, there's, it's better for everybody, so they can understand, be like, hey, we have, they can recognize and almost do a quick triage of, we have this many people down in room 15. And them being able to recognize it, and then them being able to, self-aid or buddy aid if, they do come in contact and take a round. Those guys, they're our brothers in blue. So we want to make sure they're taken care of, and they don't have the tools or the training. It's just dangerous for everybody. So it's sad, but, I'm glad we're seeing guys show up on their own time, potentially on their own dollar. But yeah, I would rather pay more tax dollars, have it in their training budget, contact us. We can come out to your, we'll take care of your agency, consult with you and see what, we can do to make sure that your guys are safer on the streets.
So before we get too much in the rabbit hole, because I tend to get a lot of that too.
Yeah.
What, for anybody who's watching there, what are the goals of the class that we took? Kind of talk about the class a little bit. What is the overall broad goals of it? And who are the type of people that you would want, or ideally who do you want to see in these type of classes? What's the ideal student, if you will? Sure.
So the ideal student is probably anybody with a pulse that's over 10 years old. I mean, I truly mean it. And we can joke about that, but I think our youngest student was 9 or 10. And, we explained to the parent, hey, the severity of the class, and there's going to be disturbing images and graphic images and stuff like that. But truly, bleeding control is the new CPR. CPR had a really, really big kick way back in the day with the American Heart Association, and they were teaching it in high schools, and they were teaching it for lifeguards, and they were teaching it basically almost every job site you went to. Everybody knows CPR. And so bleeding control really, to me, is the new CPR. And so our target demographic is anybody that's willing to jump in and help. Anybody that's willing, obviously we drew a crowd from people on the range. But when we go to these corporations and we do these active shooter response trainings, people love it. They want to get involved. You give people the tools and the knowledge to get involved and help, and you see people jump in and get active all the time. So it's people that are aimed towards personal responsibility, that want to help, that understand that it's not the movies. People do get injured, and unfortunately, the way that these injuries can occur, by the time we get there, and are able to render care as first responders, it might be too late. And so having the tools and the knowledge for jumping in and performing immediate action medical, that's, all you need is the wanting to help and, going out there and getting the training.
Okay. And so we kind of went over throughout the class the goals of the TCCC, right? We went through the differences of battlefield triage to civilian stuff, and we'll kind of get more into that stuff. And for me, I hate to say it, but the media makes a big to do of all these mass shootings that were happening all the time now, and I want them to go down to Chicago and tell me mass shootings, because there's shootings in Chicago every day, every week, a mass shooting incident. It's just kind of sad that they're going after the 2A community that way, and I think more and more people who have this type of knowledge can also help just spread the word of who the 2A community is.
Sure.
On top of that, we had, for me, I live in Wisconsin, years ago, 10, 15 years ago, we had a active shooter incident at a nail salon or a beauty parlor in Brookfield, where it was an angry boyfriend goes in there. So, having these corporate events and just knowing what to do to help after, for any care. You look at the Boston Marathon bombing, you don't even need guns to cause problems. That's
right.
I don't want to get on my big kick, but guns are not the issue. People are the issue. And what happened there, and how many people, helped out to get, injured people to the hospitals and stuff like that. And we kind of were looking at some of these images, what can happen, and, carrying simple stuff. So I carry on me, my everyday stuff, I carry this on my ankle, and so I have tourniquets, scissors, chest seals, all that stuff. And, it adds a couple pounds on my ankle, but just having this with me every day, and everybody says I'm crazy. I'm like, well, you never know. I'd rather have it and not need it than all of a sudden something happen, whether it's to me or somebody around me, that I can help out and give them those extra minutes till somebody like you can get out there, EMS can get out there to take it from there. What can you talk about briefly too? I mentioned about the difference between battlefield and civilian, TCCC.
Sure.
Where does that line? Everybody watches the movies and sees medics go and blood squirting everywhere. I mean, what's the big difference here?
Yeah. So the way the military, when it comes to medicine, is just one big experiment. Okay. Everything that we are practicing, we got from the military, and it just takes years and years to filter down to the first responder civilian level. So TCCC is a course, a combat casualty course for the military. It was then adapted to TECC, and that course specifically is for civilian responders, so firefighters, paramedics. They actually had branched off and have done law enforcement. And so you get this, it's not a watered down version by any means. It is geared for the civilian world. So the definitions are changed for civilians. They are, some of the military care has changed for civilians. So we don't, even on the ambulance, we don't start antibiotics in the field. We don't use TXA, which is in, the military uses. There's a slew of stuff that just doesn't transfer over to the civilian world. And so when we receive, or not, I shouldn't say receive, but, when tactical emergency casualty care was created, it was based off of TCCC in the military. So there's some subtle nuances and differences, and it just has to go, follow the line of care that's available in the area. They're same in principle. Some of the nomenclature has changed, but it's, win the fight, treat patients, and finish the mission. Like that's really what it comes down to. And people get hung up on TCCC versus TECC versus our class, which is TTCC, and stop the bleed, and it's all the basic premise. It's win the fight, don't cause more injuries, don't do bad medicine, don't have bad tactics, stay safe, and it just depends on your setting. When I said this in our class, I believe there's no medicine in a gunfight, right? That was one of the big things I was harping on. So, the military can get into direct threat care, indirect threat care, care under fire. And so for the civilians we're teaching, some of that just doesn't transfer over. It's, hey, if you are in a situation, you're not going to be able to render care if you're in an active gunfight. It's not possible. You can't do it. Unless you have a bunch of buddies with you and, they can run security and they can engage the threat. You're not going to be able to do it if you're rendering aid. So, but I don't know who you hang out with necessarily, but I know my buddies are not able to do that. So,
Yeah.
So that's really what it comes. It's just subtle nuances and changes that had to be changed for the civilian world. A lot of it's the same. It really is the same. Some of the care changes just because of who carries what. Civilian ambulances don't carry the same thing as 18 Deltas or PJs. So it's a subtle changes, but it's stop the bleeding. Make sure they have an airway, respirations. They go into the March algorithm. So it's just. I'm just rambling now about it, but it's just subtle differences to fit the civilian world and the application that you're going to use it in.
And I think that was one of the bigger differences that we're talking about is, with the medicine, like you said, there's no suppressive fire. I'll go tourniquet this guy's arm. It's, somebody's lying there, whether and it didn't even have to be a gunshot. I think we even talked about, it could be something happened outside of it. It's just a penetrating wound. It might not be a bullet. It's just something happened. So it's more about the medicine. And I remember when you said bad medicine can still kill. If they're not doing it the right way, they put, it's a juncture wound and they're trying to put a tourniquet on, or they're packing the box, if you will, and
right.
The bad medicine. And so people may have the best intentions even at times, but they don't have the right application. It's bad medicine at that point.
Sure, absolutely. And it comes down to training. It really does. It's, the class that you took and the class that we teach, it's a basic introduction. And, Gary and I especially, we're big on training. And so we say, hey, you got the basics now. Now you have to practice. You have to practice throwing tourniquets. You have to practice wound packing. You have to practice and recognizing wounds. Is it massive hemorrhage? Stuff like that. The last thing you want to do is be the person that was trained to help to a basic level and screw it up. You don't want to be that guy. So nobody wants to be that guy. So yeah, no, but you're absolutely correct. Bad medicine, even good medicine at the wrong time could be the wrong tactic. And can lead to further injuries and death potentially. So it's just the right sequence at the right time, and that's what we try to beat into people's heads.
And I'm going to try to see how good I am at this video editing. I'm going to try to insert some pictures of our role playing that we did outside, because part of it is communication, right? Somebody may be lying there, and there's different scenarios where somebody was complaining that they hurt themselves, and he's pointing up here, and if you didn't catch the nuance that he said, he had trouble breathing and things of that nature. So it's not just knowing the medicine; it's being able to communicate to these people. He also talked about if a guy's getting shot on the range, or he's uses his everyday carry, and they happen to be shot out in the public, let's say, and he has a firearm on him, you really don't want to be packing a wound or sensing on a tourniquet while he still has his gun, because he or she may be in pain and things of that nature. So it's also knowing some of these subtle nuances, that basic level of what to look for and to try to avoid while you're trying to help out, if you will.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you bring up a great point, and that's, the first, nobody wants to give up their firearm, whether you're civilian, LEO, military, operator, no one wants to give up their firearm. But if you're rendering aid to somebody that's injured, especially if there's extreme blood loss. It might not even be penetrating trauma. They might be having a diabetic emergency. They might, have a fever and might not be acting right. So the first thing you got to do is secure that firearm for your own personal safety and for their safety. Because once you're unable to discern, who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, and, potential delirium, like secure that firearm, then treat the patient. The one thing we harp on is who's number one. And I'm number one. I'm always number one. Because if I go down, I can't help anybody. It's like on the airplane when they say put your mask on yourself and then help your neighbor if they need it. Because if something happens to you and you're useless, well, the situation is not going to get any better. So that's just that sequence of events of doing things correctly.
Well, yeah, and anybody who does this class probably has a lot more. Even though it's a basic level class, we have more knowledge now than majority of the public. So if anything were to go down, you have to take care of yourself so you can help out and be there to help out.
Absolutely.
I thought about that because you asked that question, right? Who's number one? You're with the family. I have 2 young boys. If I'm on the family and something goes down, I still have to be number one. My family's number 2, but I still have to be number 1. Otherwise, I can't take care of them.
Absolutely.
Situation.
Absolutely.
So, talk briefly about that March algorithm. You talked about how the military was talking about it, and we touched on it briefly. Can you just give a basic overview of kind of what that stands for and
So there's not a big debate in EMS, but things move slowly. Okay. So the March algorithm is basically an assessment sequence, if you will, and it's being able to recognize trauma or issues going on with the patient. And we've gone from, we used to do ABCs, and ABCs was the big thing. And then we went to CAB, and then we had all these algorithms. Just like that's what my whole career has been filled with, is algorithms. So now we're using the March algorithm. And so it stands for massive hemorrhage, airway, respirations, circulation, and hypothermia. And it's being able to recognize in sequence what massive hemorrhage is, identifying it, and then correcting it. And then once you correct it, you go to airway. And then once you correct that, or if there's no airway issues, then you go to respirations and you correct that. And so in class, what we were teaching you was the majority of it was massive hemorrhage. That was kind of stop the bleed on steroids. So we would teach you, massive hemorrhage. Does this person need a tourniquet? Do they need wound packing? Do they need a pressure dressing? Okay, then we'd go on to airway. And there's simple ways to recognize if this person's, do they have a patent airway? Are they coughing up blood? Are they, on their side? Are they able to expel any fluids in their throat? Can you sit them up? Can you sit them up in a position of comfort where they're now not going to compromise their airway? They're not going to drown on their own fluids. That's very, very simple stuff that nobody necessarily thinks about. And once we move on from airway, we go to respirations. Respirations, the biggest thing that we're going to be doing is penetrating trauma in the box, chest seals. We were harping on it. Chest seals, chest seals, chest seals. Chest seals it's a big sticker. It's a clear sticker with a vent, and it can prevent tension pneumothoraxes. Those are the long-term effect from penetrating trauma potentially. And then we would go to circulation and hypothermia. Now, circulation, there's not a whole lot you're going to do in the field as a civilian. And the science has changed. I'm sure you've seen on, name some medical, ER back in 1995. They start two large bore IV stat and just fill them up with fluid. Well, the science has changed. We don't do that anymore. That's bad medicine. And you still see some dinosaurs on the job trying to do that, and it's not helping anybody. But as a civilian, you're not carrying whole blood around with you, which is, the new gold standard. We're not carrying whole blood in the ambulance. We don't have refrigerators for it. So then we move on to hypothermia, and hypothermia is my big stick now. We do all this high speed shit, and we think we're doing like operator stuff in the field. and then we don't cover the patient. We don't heat them up. We don't add hot packs to make sure that they're warm and, try to keep them out of hypothermia to make sure they don't have organ failure, from the lack of circulation, stuff like that. So hypothermia, I cannot stress it enough. If anybody's listening out there, hypothermia is real. It's especially dangerous in trauma patients. Keep your patients warm. Put some aluminum foil on them. Keep a Mylar blanket on you. If you have a kit on you, just keep your patients warm after you treat them for trauma. I can't stress it enough.
Yeah, that 79-cent blanket, that you can find anywhere.
It's super expensive.
Blanket. Yeah,
I think the cost is prohibiting people from,
Yeah, and I look, let's see, it takes up a whole, I don't know, 1.5 by 2.5 inch.
Yeah.
It's such, and before taking that class, honestly, I never had one on my kit. And then when we took that class, and even if you look at any of the EDC, the everyday carry kits that you can buy that have very rarely have because I was looking after that. Mm-hmm. They don't have those as part of the kit. You have to buy those blankets separately. And it's like, and you gave some stats. I mean, that's okay. This guy's in the helicopter in military, or you stop the wound on the street, and okay, the blood's there, but then all of a sudden he dies because of hypothermia. What did you didn't do any? That's back to not doing the right things.
No, you know what? And I think honestly, I think it's not flashy. Aluminum blankets aren't flashy, so you're not throwing tourniquets, you're not packing wounds, you're not needle decompressing, all the high speed cool stuff that everybody wants to do when it comes to medicine. I just don't think that aluminum foil and Mylar blankets are sexy. I really don't. I mean, there's no other reason. Either they don't know, so that's a training thing, an education thing, or it's just not sexy, or they just didn't finish what they started. They didn't finish the sequence of what they were supposed to do. So, MARCH, go through all of them, go back, reassess. And if you're doing your job correctly, you're not going to miss that. Just keep it march in the back of your head. Just keep pounding in the back of your head. And so, for 1.5 inches and $2, I'll just give those away to people. I mean, here's some aluminum foil, wrap your patient, keep them warm.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not even just with trauma patients and with any wounds or anything. It's just everyday life. I mean, you're out and about in the wintertime. You're out there with your kids or whatever. It's just recognizing the signs of hypothermia at a simple level to help somebody out. I kind of picked up from the class on different signs to look for the hypothermia. That to recognize that stuff early, just in normal day, non-cool shit, tactical trauma.
Yeah,
right.
Just life. Yeah, just everyday life,
normal life. And there's other things that we talked about, on the range from, dehydration to hypothermia in the wintertime. I was shooting in the wintertime, and it was cold this year in February, and the fingers going numb, and just recognizing these things beforehand, so it doesn't get to a bad place. So, I completely agree. Right away I went online and looked. I mean, there's 79 cents. I bought like 10 of them.
Yeah.
There goes $10,
Yeah, right. And
a bunch.
Yeah, have a bunch on you, store them everywhere. I mean, it's just one of those things that, if you are doing, the algorithm correctly and you're monitoring your patient, and, and if you don't have one on you for, whatever reason, you don't have your kit on you, or what, in one of the scenarios, we were at a grocery store. Go tell someone, go to aisle 7 and get me aluminum foil right now.
10 rolls of Reynolds now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, just a little bit of thinking outside the box, and, a little creative street medicine every now and then, just keeps you on your toes, and, makes you more educated, in my opinion. So
one of the things that we went over, and I want to make sure we cover is, and I don't know, you don't have to have the stats off the top of your head, but, we talked about the penetrating wounds, and you gave different percentages of deaths, if you will. Mm-hmm. And how we quickly found out by doing the tourniquets or the chest seals or the wound packing, how greatly that's reduced, just giving them that extra time. And then because we also went out and did a little exercise, and I posted videos on my Facebook, or not videos, photos of just the blood loss and how much blood does the human body have. And after, so much time, here's a liter of blood. This is what happens. Here's a liter and a half. This is what happens. Can you talk about that briefly? Just an overall,
Sure.
30,000 viewpoint of what that is.
Yeah. So what we're really trying to do is it's immediate, medical in a hostile environment potentially. And so people don't understand how quickly you can bleed out from, penetrating trauma, even blunt force trauma, depending on, where it, what happened or the type of injury or mechanism. But depending on where, if you do take a round, you have 2 to 3 minutes. And so we're literally just trying to bridge the gap from the time of incident to the time professional EMS gets there. So if you, have a clean sever of your femoral artery, you have 2 to 3 minutes. And extremity trauma was one of the leading deaths in the military early in Iraqi freedom and enduring freedom. So we talked about the Ranger tourniquet. Guys were making tourniquets out of basically what's it called, ratchet straps, and that was helping reduce, death on the battlefield. Either they couldn't get an evac quick enough, they couldn't get a helo, they were just stuck on, in gunfire, a long mission. And so these tourniquets were buying guys time on the battlefield, and that is what led to commercial tourniquets being, mass produced in the United States. So I believe I have the stats somewhere. I think it was, depending on, where the, trauma might be, torso trauma, we talked about is we can't correct it in the field. We can't stop the bleeding. It's not going to look like a lot of blood. It's going to be internal. And that's why we go with chest seals. You need a trauma surgeon, you get to the OR. But when it gets to extremities and junctionals, that's where we really can step in and make a difference. And if I'm not mistaken, I think 10% of individuals that were killed in action was preventable extremity trauma. And that is, 10% of all people killed in battle. That's a huge number just by, throwing a tourniquet. That 10% of, that to me, it's amazing, how far we've come. But, these things, there's bad science, bad information out there, and, Rangers and, special operations, they basically changed medicine for kind of the world. Throwing tourniquets and doing all the stuff that we never did has had such a profound impact on EMS and civilians and, law enforcement. It's really changed the game.
Yeah, it's kind of, and I'll try to put in the stats because I wrote them down in my book. But it's weird to think, and I'm newer to the 2A community. I've owned firearms. I've talked about this in other videos, but this past year and hooking up with Front Sight, I've really gotten big and involved in this. And that's why I'm doing these videos, to get this information out, because quite frankly, it's hard to find, as bad as that sounds, for people to find these classes and information in my area in Wisconsin, which is kind of sad because we are very pro 2A,
sure,
as opposed to Illinois, where I find most of these classes. So that's why I'm doing this. But it's weird to find or to know that tourniquets haven't really been around that long. Something as simple as that. Since the early 2000s, when the Rangers were using them to commercial now.
Yeah, and so the war kicked off in 2001, right? I went to EMT school in 06. 06. I went to medic school, and even then, tourniquets were taboo. We heard about every now and then. If you can't stop the bleeding, then use your belt, and it's a last ditch effort. So we're not. I'm not that old. I don't have that much time on the job. So even when I started, tourniquets were completely taboo, and that's just how long. So it was 5 years that the war had been going on when I first really got into medicine. And then it took up until 2014 or about 2014 for it really to kick off in the civilian population, and seeing commercial tourniquets and buying them for the ambulances and the engines. And I mean, it's incredible how slow some of this stuff actually moves, and the amount of lives that we could have been saving had we just used this innovation, or it was able to trickle its way down to the civilian world. It could have made such a big difference for everybody across the country.
So we talked, and I'm going to again try to insert an image of this. We talked about the different wounds. So we talked junctional, which is going to be your Well, I'll take that back. Your extremities, your arms, your legs, things of that nature. The actual physical length of the leg, from crotch area down. The joint of your hip. The same thing. The joint of the shoulder down. That is an extremity wound. And those are ones that we put tourniquets on. We talked about junction wounds. That's in that junction, things of that nature. But there's hard bone, up here by the collarbone, shoulder. We talked about junctional, where we're wound packing, that type of stuff, right? And then we talked about the box, and that's, as you said, is you got to get into an OR. That's what's going to save you. And those are those chest seals. Wound packing, it's all soft tissue in there. You're going to start pushing people's lungs in, or hard, or whatever it may be. You don't stuff anything in.
Don't pack the box. Don't pack the box.
So that was kind of cool just to learn that and to see that. And we had some practice with that, which was nice. You had chest seals. You had one of those medical dummies, if you will, and we're sticking chest seals, and it's actually amazing how sticky that chest seal is. I mean, we passed the same chest seal with the dummy, and we're all taking it on and off, on and off.
Yeah.
It's on there. The tourniquets, we practice with those, and trying to see getting that up, whether it's on yourself or a buddy. And obviously we weren't cranking it down as hard as we could on each other, but just seeing what it feels like. And one of the things we talked about is other training courses will start having blood, stuffing a pig, and you have to stuff it, or squirting fake blood on you and making it all slippery, trying to get that cool Instagram shit going on, is how I always look at it. And the one thing I really enjoyed about the class was, as we're going through and learning these and practicing, it was basic. It wasn't all the craziness. So you can get it down before all that craziness could happen. I convert it to the firearm, dry fire, muscle memory. And that's kind of what we were doing, was just getting the basics down of how to pack the wound, how to put on a tourniquet or put on a chest seal. Just start basic and just keep practicing. So that I know some guys I've talked to, like, oh, well, didn't you get blood all over you and all that fake blood? I don't want to do any of that shit. And it's like, no, it's not what this particular class is. There's other ones out there that are like that, but this will give you that basic knowledge to build off of. And if you want to go get soaked in fake blood, they're out there.
Yeah. And we're not here. We think everybody going out there and getting medical training, as long as it's correct, informative, evidence-based medical training, we're not here to put down anybody. We're all, in the same community. We think the more knowledge out there is just better for general public safety. But it's like building a house. We're here to give you a foundation and build upon those skills. And so when you do start throwing in some of the theatrics and stuff like that, it can take away from, to me, and this is just my own personal opinion, it can take away from that foundational building of skills and understanding. And we really try to hammer in why we're doing it. And, I don't know what that was.
Oh, that was me.
Okay. So we're just trying to build a foundational skill. And, I've been on, pre-hospital, in the hospital, and I've dealt with GSWs, both pre-hospital. I've dealt with, commercial and, industrial industries, chainsaws and K-12s and bad car accidents. And I've been in the hospital where guys have, come in riddled with bullet holes. And I mean, I've dealt with a decent amount of trauma, and I have never to this day been sprayed in the face with an arterial bleed. I haven't. And maybe I dodged it and I didn't realize that I dodged it, but I've just never, I've never seen that. And so for, I have 14 plus years doing this. And so for me to take a civilian or somebody who doesn't have, the skill set to work with, slippery hands or gloves, or, get their food coloring all over their clothes, like that's just not how we want to teach our course. And, those courses are out there, and there's like super awesome high speed courses out there, run and gun and throwing tourniquets and getting blasted in the face and, smoke and, there's tons of stuff out there. We used to do low light, and we used to blast heavy metal in patients' ears, or in our students' ears. And, we said, let's scale this back. Let's build on the foundation. Let's let them take this home and let them practice. And you're right, dry firing and, practicing tourniquets is huge. Getting it down faster, getting it down as quick as you can. And so I don't know how many people actually do practice tourniquets, and making sure they have a training tourniquet, but it's super important foundational skills, but medicine compared to firearms still isn't sexy. Like, I mean, I like it because I'm a medical nerd, but it's still not as sexy as, people don't have tourniquets, but they have, 4 EDCs, which would, with all of them have RMRs on it. And, but a $30 tourniquet is way too expensive. So
you have all the Gucci gear that you can have, and
yeah, exactly.
Have the more important things.
Gucci gats, yeah.
or they got that cheap Amazon one, that looks like a cat.
Oh, please, anybody that's out there, and I do not put your life on an Amazon tourniquet. It's not worth it. I cannot stress this enough. If you're buying a firearm for quality and you're putting your life on that firearm, and you're doing what you need to do to make sure that operates, at almost 100% efficiency every single day, whenever you need it, do not put your life on an Amazon tourniquet. I think they're $3 for $20 or $3 for $30, or maybe even $28.99. Do not do it. There's even fake cats out there. Go to a reputable source. Go directly to North American Rescue. Go to, come to us, Civilian Trauma Solutions. We will get you squared away with a Gen 7 cat tourniquet. That's what we sell specifically. There's a lot of other good tourniquets out there. I'm not putting any of them down as long as they're approved by the Coalition for Trauma. But do not buy anything from Amazon that you would put your life on. It's not worth it.
And swapping them out, especially if you're, with me, on the range, and Gary kind of talked about this too, you're crawling on the ground or laying on your back, turning over. And when I'm on the range, I actually have 4 tourniquets on me. I have one on my gun. I have one on my belt. I have one on my kit, and then one on my back. So I can always have, the Boy Scout in me says just have everything that I could for me. I have 4 junctures. I'm going to have 4 tourniquets.
Yeah.
Or if somebody's around me, I have one accessible at all times. If my right arm goes down, I can use my left. I can always reach one somewhere.
Yeah. One is none, 2 is one, and 4 is fun. So,
but at some point, it's like I don't have any more room. And for tourniquets, it's kind of like you said about the blood. I have another ankle. I could put an IV bag in that pant leg, and But and so my plan is just every year, just like you change your batteries and your smoke detectors. I have extra batteries for my kit, my lights and stuff like that. Just spend the money, replace them, be done with it. And now that's a training tourniquet. I have kids as they get older. I can start having them, they're 5 and 3. They're a little young yet, but, start tossing them. Here's a training one. Let's get you trained up on how to use these things, that sort of thing. So it just builds that training aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. They're extremely durable, but they are made of nylon. So, they were meant for the elements. But, we'll see, a couple of my LEO buddies, they'll be running their kits and they'll just have this tattered, just awful, dirty, frail, whatever, just ripped apart tourniquet. I'm like, yeah, I can get you a new one. If you want, I'll just give you one. Just please, just take that and throw it out or use it as training. So yeah, it never hurts, to rotate your stock and make sure that you're, every year, or, if they're getting beat up and frayed. And so, it's training, it's being prepared and having the right equipment to do it. And, do you want to put your life on a, frayed tourniquet that's been beat to shit while you're running and gunning at front sight? Once you do, swap it out. It's no big deal.
Now, I wanted to bring up, like you said, there's a lot of different tourniquets out there.
Mm-hmm.
The Cat 7, or the North American Rescue Gen 7 Cat tourniquet.
Mm-hmm.
There was another one, and I forget the name of it, and I actually just got it for my EDC because the cat was pretty thick around my ankle and was just really poking out of my pants. So I got the soft T wide, I believe is what it's considered. So it's basically like the cat, but it's a little bit slimmer. For the people that are out there, you said again, I just want to just have it set out there again. What's the certification that they need to have? The tourniquets, I should say.
Yeah. So every year, more or less every year, last year I believe was canceled. A bunch of high-speed dudes that are way smarter than me, they meet up across the country, and you're getting military influence and trauma surgeons, and it's called the Coalition on Trauma. They write the guidelines, and they basically kind of say what works and what we will endorse. And so there's a couple tourniquets out there. I'm not a salesman for any of them. None of them are giving me any money, but the cat, the North American Rescue Gen 7 cat, that's the one my company specifically uses exclusively. There's the SAM XT, I believe, the ratcheting medical tourniquet, the soft T, the wide, and then there's like the TX2, TX3. So some of these tourniquets I've never seen before. I don't know anyone that had them. I've practiced with a few of the other ones, and I'm a firm believer that as long as it's approved by the Coalition on Trauma, go ahead and use it. But if you are using one, I'm just a big fan of that muscle memory and sticking with one. That's my own personal opinion. But I just want to be proficient at, my EDC doesn't change. My tourniquet doesn't change. I just go back to that whole, the Bruce Lee. I'm not scared of someone who did 1,000 kicks once or practiced 1,000 kicks once. I'm scared of the individual that practiced one kick 1,000 times.
Sure.
And building that muscle memory, my EDC is the same. My Gen 7 cat's the same. And that's my own personal preference. I don't have time to practice with 5 different tourniquets personally. But if somebody does and they can do it proficiently and quickly and they're awesome at it, yeah, that's good for them. That's great. But as long as it's approved and it's not from Amazon and you get it from a reputable source, then yeah, more power to you as long as you're prepared and, keeping your safety in mind.
So, and then one of the other things that we talked about the class was the wound packing, different gauzes out there and how small those packages can get. So we talked about I believe it's combat gauze is yes. What it's called. Whatever it is, 4 feet and so many inches wide, but it's in a small package.
Yep.
And those are for your junction wounds, whether it's hard, bone behind there to pack that it hasn't entered into the box, if you will.
Yeah. So we use Quick Clot's combat gauze. There's other stuff out there, C-Locks and a couple other similar wound packing with hemostatic agents. So it's a Z-fold ribbon. It's 4 yards, and it's got it's impregnated with a chemical called kaolin. And what kaolin does is basically uses your natural clotting factor. So it's kind of like antibiotics. It uses your immune system. Antibiotics support your immune system. Kaolin supports your natural clotting factor in your blood. And it's, you find those bony and meaty areas on the body. So your neck and your armpits, your shoulders, your butt, your groin. And I mean, it's hard to demonstrate technique right now, but you get as much of that 4 yards of material into that wound, and then you got to put 3 minutes of direct pressure on it. And 3 minutes is might be a little bit longer, but that's the standard that they tell you. 3 minutes of direct pressure, and that'll help stop the bleeding in those junctional wounds. So like I said, there's other brands out there. We just happen to use Combat Gauze. It comes in black and green, and people get confused. It's the same shit. All right. So one's green, looks cool for the military. One's black, it's tactical for LEOs. I don't care what it is. I could have yellow packaging, and I'll use it. I don't care. So, but yeah, as long as you're using it correctly and you're training it appropriately, whatever you have, they do have an expiration date. I believe it's every 5 years. So depending on when you get yours from the distribution cycle, it could be 2 to 3, and that's like $42 every 3 to 5 years. It's minimal. I mean, what's ammo these days? So just making sure you have Combat Gauze that's ready to work. Just being prepared.
Well, one of the things, so it's 3 minutes for the quick clot, or that has that age, and 10 minutes, correct, for regular gauze. Is that?
Yeah. So yeah, you're absolutely correct. I'm glad you brought that up. So if you don't have quick clot with the kaolin impregnated into it, and you just have some sort of gauze that you picked up at Walgreens, or you're having some first aid kit at work or something, and you are able to pack the wound with that, you have to apply pressure for 10 minutes. And I'm telling you, in these trainings, we compact the class, it's usually 5 to 6 hours. So having people hold a knee or hold pressure for 3 minutes is a long time. That's an eternity to me. And then having to do it for 10, I mean, just my time's worth money. I don't have time for 7 more minutes to hold pressure. So I just opt for the quick clot, the Combat Gauze.
Well, then it gives you an opportunity to go through that March algorithm then and put a knee down or whatever and get that pressure, and then continue assessing to see if there's anything else that needs attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we teach, we really want to get people into, doing those quick rapid trauma assessments. What's the primary wound? What's going to kill them first? Really, that's what it comes down to. What's going to kill them first? And then doing a blood sweep, looking for secondary wounds, looking for exit wounds, stuff like that. So, and plus, situations are dynamic. I mean, it's, an active shooter situation or, whatever. When gunfire is involved, it's a static situation. Things can change, so you might be in indirect threat care or something. You think there's maybe one shooter, threat's been terminated, but all of a sudden, you start hearing gunfire again, so if those 3 minutes are up and you've been able to, appropriately care for this, I mean, you get out, take up a security position, and we're talking medicine, not a gun class, but I'm not going hunting for an active shooter. So I'm getting out of there. But, so things are always changing. And if 10 minutes is just a really, really long time, and that's where, hey, if you don't want to be involved, could you please just put pressure on this wound so I can, treat another person or something like that. And that's trying to get people involved. Most people will help if you ask them, as long as they don't have their phone out. But, just they might be intimidated and looking for direction. If you give people direction, then most people will help out.
Yeah, and one of the things when we talk about regular gauze, if you will, it's a great. What I was thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, you just for practicing. I think you talked about. I mean, yeah, you could always get a roast and try to pack it a hole, or if you want to go get a pig, but to practice that technique. So that's why I want guys to go to the class so they can see that technique, but. You can almost use that regular gauze to get that technique, and it's cheap to practice with, if you will. And
yeah, absolutely. Do not buy Combat Gauze trainers. It's a blue package. It looks just like Combat Gauze, but it's blue. It says for training. It's like $13. Like that is so expensive just for training. So go get regular gauze. Go find a roast that's on sale. They're liquidating. Buy one, get one 50% off. Freeze the other one and practice in 3 months, whenever you can do it. Or just ask if they're throwing anything away. Just be like, hey, man, I'm going to practice bleeding control on this roast. Are you throwing anything away? And butcher might have some scrap roast in the back that they can't sell. But, yeah, absolutely. Just go to Walgreens. I mean, if you're not putting your life on it, yeah, go right ahead. Grab that, whatever. Ask your doctor the next time you're there. They're throwing that stuff away all the time, So That's right. Go to your doctor. Everybody, ask your doctor for stuff. Ask him for gloves. Ask him for gauze. You know, I mean, gloves are gold right now. I mean, with COVID last year, we were on a toilet paper and glove shortage in EMS. So they were checking out every time you had a document. No, I'm just kidding. But the gloves were gold for about 6 months last year. Yeah, ask your doc for them, and you know, get some gauze, and you know, just keep training. That's what it comes down to.
A little off subject, but last year with all that craziness, my wife works for a dental supply company, and they always have rummage sales every year. It stopped a couple of years ago, but they'd have rummage sales, just extra stuff that were returned, or toothbrushes that had the dentist's name wrong or whatever, and we'd get a box of latex gloves, medical gloves, for 50 cents.
Oh yeah,
I work on cars, so I mean, I literally had cases of gloves.
Oh yeah,
that's so awesome. When COVID first happened, I'm like, I got cases of this stuff. I'm going to start making money.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, I have guys who are in the medical field, and a couple neighbors that are. I'm like, hey, if you need some boxes, I have them for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to use them for my car, but I mean, if you need them, I got some.
We could have traded Clorox wipes for gloves last year if I,
something.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's funny. What about Israeli bandages? We touched on them briefly in class. I know I carry one both on my EDC as well as in my kit, if you will. What that's more for, you know, a juncture type wound or wrapping, or can you touch on that briefly?
Yeah.
What's special with that?
Israeli bandage as a whole it's more of a brand of bandage opposed to like the generic term is pressure dressing. So it could be an Israeli bandage, it could be an emergency trauma dressing from North American Rescue, it could be the Aleas. So they're all used in the same way. They're just little changes in their design and concept.
Kleenex of the medical world.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the Israeli is nice. It's a great bandage. You know, it has the clasp on it where you can, you know, put the bandage back on itself and wrap it tighter. I showed you guys that trick with the ETD to, you know, twist it over, you know, to get more pressure. Aleas is a great bandage too. It's bulky and cumbersome, but it has the little eye cup thing on it. So that's cool. But really what they're for is, you know, you can, you know, use them to add pressure for a junctional, you know, just because you have this gauze now that's sticking out of somebody's wound. So you can, you know, wrap a junctional. You have to get super creative, as we were talking about, depending on where it's at. But they can also be used for extremity injuries, you know, lacerations, you know, things that aren't massive hemorrhage, you know, and we always, you know, we were trying to really, you know, pound into your head what was massive hemorrhage and what required a tourniquet and what we could get away with a emergency trauma dressing or pressure dressing. You know, when in doubt, throw a tourniquet. But you know, if you can see fatty tissue, or it's not soaking blood, it's not spurting, it's not pooling on the ground, you know, emergency trauma dressings are fantastic tools to have in your kit. So depending on what you're using, whether it be the Israeli or whether it be, you know, like I said, the emergency trauma dressing from North American Rescue, the Aleas, they're awesome for extremities. You can use them to cover junctionals, and you just can get pretty creative with them, and they're multifunctional, and they're like $4, $5, $6, something like that, depending on, you know, which one you have. But it's a great addition to your kit. I would highly recommend that everybody has some sort of pressure dressing.
I look as it is. It's the tactical version of Ace bandage from back in the day with the.
I mean, more or less,
right?
Yeah.
And you bring up a good point where you don't always have to tourniquet, and that's what we talked about, trying to recognize the wound. And I always look back to, obviously we had a lot of issues this past summer, and there was an incident in Seattle, I believe is where it was, where somebody had a graze to the leg, and here they are, no blood or anything, but they're throwing a tourniquet on and clamping that thing down. And I look at that video, and even then I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It's not even bleeding, for God's sakes.
Yeah. I remember when that video hit, hit the internet and went viral, and it was all over like the tactical medicine community, Facebook pages and Instagram and stuff like that. And, you know, there's a lot of takeaways from it. And I look at it both ways. One, yeah, you need better training, right? So whatever, politics and all that stuff aside, like you need better training if you're going to be throwing this tourniquet, but and recognizing massive hemorrhage. But then I also look at it like, well, hey, somebody like jumped in and somebody did something, so it's there's so many different takeaways, and it's, looking at things in like a positive light, like how many people would just stand there? How many people would, well, obviously somebody had their phone out because we all saw it, but so there's so many takeaways from that video, but it's really, if you don't have the proper training, but you know what a tourniquet's for, so that's a positive. They knew to get a tourniquet on something, even if it wasn't necessary, we preach err on the side of caution. It was obvious to you and me that it didn't need a tourniquet, but to that lay person who hasn't had training, that's why we really like to focus on just, gory pictures of, disgusting mangled extremities, so people can recognize like what is, massive hemorrhage, so you don't end up on Facebook for throwing a tourniquet like that.
That's funny. And then we started to touch. We did on the class. You did a little bit of dog trauma care, or pet, I should call it, not just dog, but
sure,
pet care, which was kind of neat. I've had dogs before, and dogs are a member of the family.
Mm-hmm.
Cats kind of are, I guess, or little animals, but mainly dogs.
Right, yeah,
and shepherds and whatnot. But so that was one of the things that we didn't cover too much on, but it's very, very similar in a sense. We talked briefly on children too. We touched base on not every tourniquet generally is could be used on a kid, things of that nature. Which I implore people again to take this class to get more specific on the different techniques and stuff like that. But hypothermia, to circle back, that was always the big one. We've talked about it during class, and then towards the end too. Is probably one of the bigger killers than the wound itself. Most of the time, that's what those are coming to. So again, the Mylar blanket, I think, is the biggest thing as a takeaway from that class. Something that simple.
Yeah, and it obviously ballistics have changed over the years, but you go back to the Civil War, or even the Revolutionary War. Guys were taking musket balls. They weren't dying from the musket ball; they were dying from the infection. So it's treat the injury immediately that's in front of you. But what's next? Always think, what's next? What do I have to do to keep this person alive? And it's it's a mindset. It's training, it's education, and once it's not as sexy as everything else. Hypothermia is the least sexy thing that you are going to do when it comes to medicine, 2A, running and gunning, anything. Hypothermia is the bottom of the list. But yeah, I can't harp on it enough that it's super important. And take your hat off, put it on an individual that's been injured, put aluminum foil on them, stuff like that. And then just big on canine, big on pediatrics. So yeah, do you want me to talk about go over some of that?
You want to go over some of it briefly?
Yeah. So canine's big to me. We have 2 dogs. So one, we have a pet dog. She's 11 years old, and she somehow is always just getting injured. She's the laziest dog, but she's always getting injured. I don't know how. So she's our pet. She's a certified therapy dog. And then I'm a canine handler as well, I guess in somewhat of a professional capacity. I'm a urban search and rescue member of Illinois Task Force 1. So my partner is Canine Magnus. So he's a 13-month-old German Shepherd, still kind of a puppy, but he is, the other dog is in the backyard all the time. This guy's crawling on rubble. He's dealing with rebar. He's dealing with cement, concrete, stuff like that. And so part of our mandatory training is we have to go get educated from our vet and our vet group, and they do all the working dogs in the area. So, they deal with PD. They have the Chicago contract. They have all the local LEO dogs. And there's a lot of ballistic issues with the LEO dogs. Obviously they can get shot and stabbed, penetrating trauma. But he's dealing with concrete and rubble and rebar all the time. So we had to learn what happens. And one of the things for the pet and civilian dog world is it's overheating. Keep your dog hydrated. I mean, so many preventable deaths of canines can just be from making sure that they have water, keeping your windows open in the car. I mean, I think 4 or 5 times in my career we've gone to pets in the car in the summer, and like, you're an asshole. Like, you don't need to be told this. You know how hot it can get in your vehicle in the summer for your dog. And, I mean, my dog's accustomed to the heat. He's in my car all the time in the summer, but the windows are open. He's got water and he's got a fan on him. And, other guys on the team, they have heat indicators. So, there's an alarm company that's, monitored by satellite, and the windows open and they'll start honking. And, our team trailer, there's numbers, it'll send text to our dispatch and say, hey, the dog trailer's overheating, so something's not right. So, I mean, when it comes to dogs and, it's, hey, make sure that your dog's hydrated. If your dog is injured, get a muzzle on your dog, start muzzle training your dog, either a cloth one or a leather one, whatever you use, get a muzzle on your dog, because when your dog's in pain, your dog will bite you. There's no, and it's just not safe for you or the dog to work on them if they're not muzzled. So I just can't harp on that enough. For your own personal safety, is make sure your dog is muzzled if they do have some sort of injury. And then after that, it's finding the wound and treating it. And we can use combat gauze. We can use tourniquets. They're not overly great just because of the dog's anatomy. But a lot of it's junctional or direct pressure. So, combat gauze is kind of actually more useful when it comes to canine. And then, those are like the 2 biggest things without going down a canine rabbit hole. Sure. And then when it comes to peds, man, everybody's concerned about their kids, and I completely understand. The cat tourniquet's been used on a child as young as 1 year old. Anything that the cat won't fit on, direct pressure is going to work. They don't have the fat or muscle structure to, stop you from putting pressure on it. It might take some time, might take, 3 minutes, or depending on the type of injury, we work, we do first line tourniquets for extremities, but you can also use wound packing and direct pressure. So depending on the type of injury. So if you have a child and you have combat gauze and they're young or whatever the injury may be, you can absolutely use combat gauze and direct pressure, that 3 minutes. But even your hand, depending on how old your kid is, they don't have the muscle, they don't have the fat, their arteries are pretty superficial compared to ours as, adults that have just eaten Doritos our whole life. So yeah, I mean, kids are, obviously train with your kids and practice on, for your kids and, contingencies, but just having the right supplies and being able to apply them correctly to a, smaller population is huge. So.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to do with you is talk about kit a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say 5 things that you can have on a kit. What are going to be the top 5 things you're going to want on you doing something at like front sight, defensive type shooting? What would you have on a kit? 5 different things.
So tourniquet, huge. That would be my number one, especially at front sight. Guys are running. There's a lot of plate carriers out there, so you're going to see, with NDs would be extremity wounds. So tourniquet's one. Combat gauze, definitely up there. And this is for pretty much everybody. Tourniquet, combat gauze, chest seals. Chest seals are, they're so cheap and they're so effective. And then I would go pressure dressing, and I'd probably say the next thing would be shears. No, let's scale back. I'd go gloves. I can't even stress how, if somebody's injured, I'm going to help them, but I don't want to do it without gloves on, man. I just don't. I get grossed out by people. I mean, people are nasty, man, honestly. And, our whole shtick is, our bloodborne pathogens part of the class is if it's wet and it's not yours, don't touch it. Like just, I mean, whatever. I mean, I've seen it all. You know, I've dealt with it all. But man, people are gross. So I would go for gloves over shears, just because of my own personal issues of seeing so much of nasty
Sure.
shit. But you know, shears are super important. They're like $2.
Yeah.
So, but you know, people are got people have shears, people have knives. You know, I wouldn't use a knife on a patient, but worst comes to worst, do what you got to do to, you know, save the patient. But I would use gloves as my number 5.
Okay. Yeah, Gary did his little thing, and I'll try to insert some of the photos where he was showing us how to take him off safely, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree. I mean, worst case scenario is worst case scenario, but I don't want to get anybody's blood on me if it's
No,
and it's just not worth any risk that way. You know, especially you're out and about. I mean, I could just have a little tiny cut that I don't even know about that could cause
right.
a problem. So
Yeah.
you just never know.
No, absolutely. And like, you know, I do all, you know, I do infection control at work, and I mean, I wash my hands probably 30 times a day, you know, more with COVID. And so my hands are raw, you know, so that's just a vector for, you know, it's a portal for disease. And I start touching people's nasty shit, man, I don't want to, I'm out. I'm out. I'm out.
One of the things too that I wanted to talk about. So we talked about kits, right? And everybody goes online, buys a kit. And, okay, this is my med kit. And we talked about this in class. Is this guy right here?
Oh yeah.
Decompression needle, right?
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I carry this not for me to use, but for somebody who is trained to use.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a question there. I mean, that's kind of that to me, it's a small little item to have in what I have.
Sure.
But touch base on that, because we had a couple of guys that say, "Oh yeah, you know, I have it on me because it came in the kit that
Right.
I ordered." So touch on that briefly, the decompression needles, and even the nasal. I have that as well, but the nasal thingamabobber.
Sure. So we'll start with the nasal first. Nasopharyngeal airway, NPAs, they're great tools. We have them on the ambulance. You know, they can be used to keep an airway open. We don't teach them in class. It is a EMT basic level skill. You know, I mean, it is a skill under a professional license. And so I just think that if you're in a situation that requires doing some sort of medical intervention, especially, you know, if it's a gunshot wound or somebody's on the ground, or, you know, one of the contraindications of using one of those is head trauma. And so if you can't rule out head trauma, you have to assume head trauma. So if somebody's on the ground and they can't tell you that, no, I didn't hit my head on the ground, we don't use nasals. And so to have that experience and, you know, contraindications and understanding patient care and anatomy and physiology, to just unleash this $5 little rubber tube to civilians' hands, to, you know, it's something that, you know, I always have to think of my own professional licenses when I'm teaching. So they're great tools. I'm never going to tell anybody not to carry one. I just can't personally take on the liability for it, you know, saying, "Oh, this asshole taught me how to use this, and he was saying use it on everybody." You know, I mean, things get misconstrued, you know, and so they're great tools. So nasopharyngeals, they're $5-6. You know, I carry them on me. Okay. I mean, I know Gary does. I know my other buddies that are running kits and IFACs, they're carrying them. But to just, here's a 6-hour class, take this tube, this is how you do it, I think it's reckless. Just quick. And then, so that's not even the big one. The big one, here we go, is decompression needles. So decompression needles are like the gold standard of sexy high-speed medicine for the 2A community. Everybody wants them. Everybody wants to do it. Everybody, you know, it's like, I just don't get it. I don't know where this sexiness and allure came from. Maybe it was that Three Kings movie where they did it.
It was with a pen, wasn't it? A pen?
Yeah, I don't even. I just know it was like I don't know where it came from. So needle decompressions to treat tension pneumothoraxes, and tension pneumothoraxes are a prolonged injury. So if you have a chest seal and you immediately treat a patient, the chances of them developing a tension pneumothorax from penetrating trauma, if they get a chest seal, are super slim to none. Where you're seeing needle decompressions in, you know, the military, or if you have prolonged field care, you're in an austere setting, and there's going to be a long time before you can get to definitive care. That's one thing. I mean, it really is, and we're talking hours and hours for it to develop. It's not an immediate thing, but you can prevent it with a chest seal. It's $13. I think the needle's like $13 as well, so that's not a good argument. But
much easier to stick a sticker on somebody than try to poke them with that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it 3 times in 14 years, and 2 of the patients were dead already. So it's a extremely low frequency event, and there's risks associated with it. Like, you know, if you're stabbing somebody in the chest with a needle as thick as a Bic pen, and if they didn't have a tension pneumo, we just fucking gave them one. So I steer away from it. I don't know why everybody wants to do it. I don't know. I mean, you know, and we try to give everybody like the knowledge and the tools to, you know, do the stuff you're going to encounter in the field as a civilian. And it's, you know, I kind of want to change the name of the class to like stay in your lane medicine. So, you know, I mean, it's just that the chances that you're going to just be needle decompressing, you know, like it's just a everyday thing, are just super slim to none, especially with chest seals and immediate action medical, you know, interventions. You're just not going to be doing it. But for, you know, everybody wants to get into it and have it, and, you know, and it's like, well, I mean, go be a paramedic and you might do it once in 10 years kind of thing. You know, it's just super low frequency, high risk. So we don't teach it. You know, we showed on that chest dummy, like we,
oh yeah,
you know, I work with professional paramedics, and, you know, if everybody was right, there wouldn't be holes all over the chest, you know? So, it's just I understand why you have it. I understand why I have it. But for everybody just to be, you know, just like tossing lawn darts into people's, you know, thorax is just mind boggling to me. I don't get it. I understand being prepared, and I'll probably take some shit for, you know, my opinions on it, but I just don't think it's a skill that, you know, people, if they're doing the right things and, you know, practicing, you know, quick medical on, you know, it's a skill that I can't justify teaching people for no reason, you know?
Well, it makes sense. I mean, the chest seals take up, okay, a little bit bigger footprint. Let's just say it's not a pen type thing. Yeah. But they're so thin. They take up. You could slide in your back pocket. You'll never know that it's there. Right. If you don't carry, you know, an EDC, or even in your kit, you won't feel it. And it's so much easier to slap a seal on somebody, like you said, than try to find the right area to put that needle in.
Yeah.
That is going to take, like you said, longer to even get to that point. So if you put the seal on, by the time that needle's needed, if that seal's not working, EMS should already be on site.
Yeah. And
you can do it. You can put the needle in them.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, we operate under different guidelines when we practice our rescue task force stuff. So what we do is, you know, it's kind of that transition from what we're doing is definitely not what, you know, the average civilian should be doing. I mean, we practice it, you know, twice a year at work. It took, you know, finding landmarks and being in a controlled setting and, you know, making sure you do it right, you know, and just to have a civilian just think that, like, holy shit, I just, you know, potentially got in a gunfight. There was a gunfight. There was an active threat. My adrenaline's rushing, and now I'm just going to start stabbing people in the chest. Like, this is, you know, what the hell was that movie? Pulp Fiction, you know? Well, that was atropine. But, you know, just sticking needles in people's chests just all around isn't like a great idea for the civilian population. So,
Yeah, and that's where I do think that's why people need to take these type of classes so they can understand what that use is, what all of the uses are, and to know I God forbid I go down. I don't want anybody using that who's not a trained medical professional on me. Because
Yeah,
like you said, even trained medical professionals, if it was an easy thing to do, I mean, that was probably an area this big that had needle stabs in it,
yeah,
and it should be here,
right. Yeah, yeah. Tighter grouping.
very tight grouping.
So yeah, I mean, and it's just like I said, it's highly contested, debated. People are, always asking us, well, are we going to do this or why aren't we going to, and so we spell it out for them. And, I think we have the evidence and, the logic behind why we don't get in depth into needle decompression. And like I said, it's for prolonged field care. If you, can't get to a hospital, you're in a gunfight for, an extended period of time or can't get a helo or, stuff like that. So it just, to be stabbing people as a civilian is just, it's not. I don't even think you're covered under Good Samaritan law because no prudent civilian would be stabbing people. And so it's it's.
You're starting to put yourself out there a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, stay in your lane, medicine. New name.
So, well, as we go through this, I want to kind of just what I really enjoyed about the class is to kind of start to wrap things up a little bit is we went through all of the, I don't want to call it basic because that's just it sounds bad, but all of the general type of medicine.
Fundamentals.
Fundamentals. Thank you. We went through all of that. We went through the different products to use from the bandages to the tourniquets and all that stuff. We did, the scenarios, outside and it was very, I mean, for the 6 hours, it was a very, very good class.
Thank you.
And especially now, and I was telling guys about this too, with the cost of ammo right now.
Yeah.
This is the type of stuff that we should be re-upping on and practice on. If you don't do something every year, there's a very inexpensive class compared to some of the other classes that I've taken. Zero ammo, which was fantastic.
Right.
And still a wealth of knowledge. And with just the events of today, as far as what we're seeing day in and day out now, just over the summer to what happened in Boston, stuff is happening and it's not gun related, just stuff in general is happening in public. And I look at it as just being a prepared individual, and knowing how to take care of yourself and your family at a minimum. Walking into Walmart or walking down the street or at a park, you name it, something can happen, and it's just being prepared to take care of yourself, number one, and then to at least your family or others if you wanted to go to that point. And it's way more than just a gun. And even at work, I'm in the roofing industry. I mean, it could be as simple as, some construction rebar going through somebody's arm or chainsaw or saw cutting off a hand, whatever, you name it. Yep. It's a part of a 2A community that we took this class, that I took this class, but it goes beyond just 2A. It's just everyday life and what can happen out there. So I feel that I'm just more prepared to be out in the public and to be able to take care of myself and others.
Absolutely. The likelihood is if you carry a tourniquet and you carry a gun, you're probably going to use your tourniquet 3 times more than you're ever going to have to pull your firearm. I mean, that's just simple facts. And so when we teach the class, we teach it under, the stress and, the stressors of, a gunfight or, active shooter situation, just because that's, an active threat. If somebody falls on a rebar or construction accident or, K-12 or a rotary saw through the, thigh, there's no active threat. So it's not laid back, but, there's less stuff to worry about for your own personal safety. You can render medicine that much easier. But it can be used for everyday life, tree, you could get a tree branch can fall on you or something, I mean, there's just so many different ways that like you can bleed out for whatever reason, however the trauma was caused. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be under the guise of a gunfighter active shooter. We just put those stressors on the individuals to know that this is game time. This is the Super Bowl of when you're going to use your tourniquet, but you can use it for, whenever the situation, hiking, or if you're on a bike trail and something happens, or construction site or crash or whatever it may be. Everyday life, just being a little bit prepared and having that much more knowledge, it's going to go a long way. And, you can only get better and build upon the fundamentals. And that's what we're here for, is just to get that education out there.
And no ammo usage.
No more usage.
Very important.
So,
well, I want to thank you for taking the time to go over this with me. At the end of these, I always leave the floor to you. So if you want to kind of let people know where they can find Civilian Trauma Solutions, and what I know COVID's kind of changed some of your events and what you're doing, but this is your time to shine, and tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us on Instagram, Civilian Trauma Solutions. Find us on Facebook, Civilian Trauma Solutions, on Facebook as well. If you need to get a hold of me directly, the best way is to email. It's info@civilianttraumasolutions.com. You can always go on our partners website, training partners with Front Sight Solutions. We hook up with them for medical classes all the time. Great training group, the Chicago suburbs. And if you're looking for any type of class, we tailor it to you. Whatever your organization is, we sit in, we do some consulting work, we see what you want to do exactly, and we make it work. There's no one size fits all. COVID's changed the dynamic of how we are working with our clients and customers. Obviously, it's changed the whole work landscape, but manufacturing is still a thing. Industry is still a thing. So, we'll get out there. We can teach you about active shooter stuff. We do stop the bleed, bleeding control. We've been at a bunch of, manufacturing facilities in the area. And then we do these type of classes, the 2A community, guys that are interested in their own personal safety, and they feel that, they're responsible for their own personal safety and no one else is coming. And, we just want to make sure that you have the skills and fundamental skills to be able to save your own and save your family, save your friends. And should you choose to do so, step in and help save a stranger's life. So it's, get a hold of us, get a hold of myself, get a hold of Gary Urban or Ernie Velez over at Front Sight Solutions. They're on Instagram, they're on Facebook, and, stay out there, stay training, and stay smart, stay safe.
Well, again, I want to thank you for your time, and I will have links to all of that stuff too when I post this. So thank you again.
Thank you, Nick, for having me on. I really appreciate it. Can't wait to see you again out on the range. And once ammo gets a little bit cheaper, we'll get back out there and have some, get going.
Awesome. Thanks again.
All right, take care, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah.